these are the relationship goals. We're going to be able to do by the end of this, hopefully, is you'll learn how to access any piece of information stored anywhere in your Creator apps. You'll learn how to calculate key metrics. So maybe you want your average revenue or your total revenue or the count of all your records in a particular form. You'll be able to do that in Deluge. And you'll be able to update and erase information from your application using script. And so all of this, particularly the accessing data part, is extremely useful, and there's so many places where you could apply this that I'm not even going to try describing all of them, but you'll see how some of this works in Karen's app. So what I'm really talking about here is the data access tasks. So if you go into your Creator app and you click on the workflow button, so you open up the Deluge Builder, all of these tasks right here, they're called data access because they let you access your information. So just real quickly before I actually go in and teach you the syntax of these, I want to explain what a couple of these tasks do. So the most important task by far is the fetch records task, the second one listed there. And so when you think about what fetch records does and how the syntax of fetch records works, it's actually like searching through a report. So, for example, if I go into our registrations report, fetching a record would be like just going here and I would choose which form I want to look at the data of. So I've chosen my registrations data, and then I would choose what I'm looking for. So maybe all the people who live in Pleasanton, for example, that would be like fetching a record. So it's just kind of helpful when you're writing all this script, which is a little abstract, to think about the parallel of like what this script is doing to like what a human would actually be doing. That's the equivalent thing, right? So the other task that we're going to focus on a lot is update records. This is pretty straightforward also. So maybe what I could do is I could come in here and I could choose this record of one of our students and their phone number has changed for some reason. So I could punch in something new there. That's what the update records task does. And then we have for each record. So what this does is it allows you to write a loop. So if you already have some background in programming, you probably have some idea of what that means. But for those of you who don't, this basically means that you can go through your records one by one and algorithmically decide what to do. So we could open up all the records in a particular form, and we can say, hey, is this person from Pleasanton? No? Okay, I'm not going to do anything. Is this person from Pleasanton? Yes, they are. Okay, I'm going to send them an email. And we can go through our records one by one and make decisions. And you can actually do pretty complicated trees of decision making by using a for each record loop. Okay, so now let's actually jump into the Deluge part. So we're going to go over the fetch records syntax. This is the most important one. If you learn how to write the fetch records syntax reliably, all of the other data access tasks are going to be pretty easy for you because they're all based on the same principles. So here's how this works. Remember, fetching records is like searching through a report. So what we do is we first have a variable, and that variable will just contain whatever information we're looking for. And then we have our form name. So we're deciding which form we're going to look for our data. And then the last part is we have some criteria over on the right. And so that might be the hardest part of writing this syntax. But basically we can say, okay, maybe I want to look in the registrations form, and I want to look at the city field, and I want to find only records where the city is equal to Pleasanton. So I could just write that in a line of Deluge, and it actually is not too hard to read when you see the finished product. You can kind of just see what's happening by reading the Deluge once you're just a little bit more familiar with it. And that just takes a bit of time. So one key point here, when we talk about field, the field that you put in this spot of the syntax, that will be the related field, or the field that you're searching through in the report that you're looking at. Okay, so the other thing I want to point out real quick is that when you use this syntax, you have a new data type to learn about, which is called collection variables. So all of the information about the record or records that you find will be stored in this collection variable. And collection variables have a couple of special traits, and they just work a little bit differently. But what's important to know about a collection variable is that it can contain a few different things. So maybe there's only one student who lives in Pleasanton, right? So our collection variable could contain a single record. Or maybe we have a dozen people who are in Pleasanton. So our collection variable could be a list of a bunch of records. And then maybe we don't find anyone who's living in Pleasanton and it's just null. So some people can get a little confused when you move from fetching a single record to fetching a list of records. I just want you to remember that you don't know what you're going to get necessarily. Sometimes you get a list, sometimes it's just one. So when you want to fetch a record, you have to write criteria. And the criteria is just this little segment of the syntax I already showed you, and this is what tells creator which records apply in our fetch. So remember, we have this operator here in the middle. So you can say city equals Pleasanton, or city equals maybe some other variable, or city equals something that's input into a field. All of those different things you could put as your expression. And for the operator, you don't just have to do equals. You could also do the less than, greater than kind of thing. So maybe if the field you're looking at is a number, like the capacity of one of our classes, we could say we only want to look at classes where the capacity is greater than 0, because there's still spaces left. And keep in mind that for dates, if you're dealing with a date field, like maybe the start time of our lesson, these operators have different meanings. So if we wanted to maybe fetch all the records that start after September 1st, right? We could just use start time after, which will just be that greater than sign, and then put in September 1st, and it has to be formatted the way dates are formatted in our application settings. But that's how you could write something like that. Okay, so how would we fetch Sally's record? So hopefully you all have imported the spreadsheet by now with all of the information about our registered students. So imagine that I'm going in here and I want to find information about a student whose first name is Sally. So I can go and search in our registrations report, and we see that one record for Sally pops up here. So what we're going to do now is we're going to write a fetch record script that will recreate this process and fetch all of this information about Sally inside Deluge. So the way we would do this is we'll choose the name of our collection variable. We want to give it a descriptive name. So I'll just call this Sally info, because all of the information about Sally will be contained in there. And then we say which form we're going to look at. So we're going to look inside our registration form. And then finally, we have our criteria over on the right. So the first name field is equal to Sally, and we use a double equals sign there. So if you want to test this out yourself, you can go into Karen's cooking app and you can create a little function to explore in. So I'll just show you how you do this. If you want to experiment with code throughout the day, you can use this little trick. So everybody go and click on the workflow button in Karen's cooking app, and then click on functions. And your screen will probably look a little bit different. You'll probably have a big blue button that says no functions have been created yet. So is everybody there at the create function interface? So what you'll do is you'll start creating a function, and you're going to get this little pop-up which has all this stuff that it's asking you for, and you don't know what a lot of it means probably, because these aren't the best names in the world. I'm not going to take the time to explain all of these right now. I think we'll go into it in a bit more depth later on, but for now, let's just call this experiments or Deluge experiments, whatever you want to call it, to remind yourself that this is where I can just play with some code and it won't really mess up my app. Namespace, you can just leave that blank, and then return type, set that to void, and we'll just hit done. Okay, so now I have a little place where I can go play with some code. So what we're going to do is fetch Sally's record. So I will drag on this fetch records task, into my function. So I'll drag that on, and make sure you're in the free flow mode of scripting, so you might have to switch this button up here so you can actually type in your function space there. And we'll drag this on. So I'm going to call my variable Sally info, and then I have to choose a form. So when I actually click on where it says form, you can see over on the right here, all of the form names in our app are automatically populated there, so we don't even have to remember what they're named. So I'll choose the registrations form. And then it automatically takes us over to the field, and it shows us all of the fields that are inside the registrations form, so we don't even have to remember those. So I will choose first name here. And then for operator, it shows us all the operators we can pick from. So I'm just going to choose equal to. And then finally, for the expression, this part doesn't really help you out too much, but if you're writing this code in a different place, it might suggest the fields on the particular form that you were using. So remember, we're just looking for Sally's record, and since Sally's name is stored in a single line, it's a string, so we'll put her name in quotes. So I can save this script. If you look at the bottom here, you can hit save script, or you can hit Command S or Control S. That might also work for you. It's a little shortcut. Okay, so now if we wanted to see what was inside this collection variable called Sally info, we could just do info Sally info and then hit save and run our script, and it would show us what's inside there. So is everybody pretty much there? You've created a function, you've written one fetch, we've got that working. So now what happens, we fetched all this information about Sally, but how do we actually extract just one piece of information about her? So there's actually an extra part of the fetching syntax for pulling out one of these fields of information about Sally. So what we could do is, this part on the left, this is just like the shortened version of the fetch record syntax, and then what you add on to it is dot and then the field name that you're looking for. Okay, so try writing this script in your little function and then save that and then try hitting execute, and we'll see if we can get Sally's phone number. So I'm going to do this with you. So if I want to see her phone number, I'll do Sally info dot, and then you can see over on the right side here, once I put in that dot, it already knows what we're trying to do. It shows us all of the fields to pick from there, right? So we will choose her phone number. So I will hit save, and then I'll execute this script. And when I execute it, I get this little thing here where it gives me log messages, and you can see we've pulled out just Sally's phone number. So obviously we can actually change phone number to any other field, and we can pull out any information we want about Sally. Okay, so now you've learned the basic version of fetching records. I think you guys are ready for the advanced version. So the advanced version is where you just add on a few other pieces of your criteria, if you will. So what happens if there's a bunch of students named Sally, or a bunch of people that live in Pleasanton? We could have a list of people that's returned to us, but maybe we only want part of that list to actually be saved in our collection variable. So that's what this sorting and arrange part is all about. So at the end of your fetch records syntax, you could start by sorting it. So how does sorting work? It's pretty simple. You just say sort by, and then you choose a field, and then you choose ascending or descending. And so what ascending and descending mean can be different for different field types. So for example, if we wanted a list of all of the students that have signed up for classes, and we want to sort them ascending by first name, it's just going to put them in alphabetical order, right? If we were sorting by a date field, we could do chronological or reverse, and then we could even do numeric fields, right? So biggest number first or smallest number first, we could choose how that works. And then finally there's range. And so this one's a little bit confusing, but let's say you have a really long list of stuff and you only want the first thing on that long list. because maybe what you're doing is you're trying to find what is the most recent student who signed up for a class. So maybe we could sort by the date field, and we could sort that descending. So the first thing on the list we know will be the most recent class that's been signed up for. And then we could add in a range. So we could say we only want the first record, so we're looking at the most recent item always when we execute this script. So when you do range from X to Y. And so X and Y, you can just put in numbers there. You could also put in variables if you are so inclined. But what's a little weird about this is that if you want to get a range of just the first record in your entire list of records, you have to do a range of 0 for X. So 0 is the first record. You would assume it would be 1, but it's actually 0. Okay, so this is quiz time. If anybody gets the answer right, I think that's grounds for a t-shirt. So knowing what you know about sorting and range, how would you select the newest record in a form? You could sort by the added time of a record, descending. So we want to find the newest record first. We're going to choose a range of 0 to 0, which grabs only the first record. Okay, so we've learned the basic way to fetch a record, right? We were just fetching one particular thing. We were just fetching Sally's record. But probably you're going to be building an application where you want it to be a little bit more automatic, right? You want to be fetching based off of something that's been input into a field. And most likely you'll run into a case where you want to fetch information from a related form. So once you relate your forms with your lookup fields, you want to be able to access all of that related data. And so the way that fetch records works for lookup fields is a little bit different, to say the least. So we already covered this, but the main point here is you have to remember that every record has information which creator is storing about it, which you're not necessarily seeing, right? So we're always keeping track of when that record was added. We're always keeping track of when it was modified, even if you haven't built in a field for that. And another thing that we're always doing is we're creating a unique ID number for every single record in your application. And so the data type of a record ID is an integer, or big int, so it's just a number, which is important to know, and I'll explain why in just a second. But first, I want to explain why we have a unique ID number for every record. So if you're used to building databases, you've probably heard these terms like a primary key and a foreign key. This is the same idea. And if you're not used to it, don't worry, I'll explain. So imagine that we're the state of California and we have 30 million plus people living in our state. And we need to give all of them driver's licenses. So it just so happens that we run into cases where there's a couple people who have the same exact name and they're born on the same exact day. And how are we going to tell those two people apart in our system if we need to have a database of all these driver's licenses? So remember all those GIFs of like the computers just completely failing to do something where they're falling over? A computer can't look at these two faces and see, oh yeah, these are different guys. They have different mustaches, right? A computer is not as smart as us. So a computer needs this insane, unique number added onto the driver's license so it can identify each one as a unique person. And so the same concept of non-unique names and unique license numbers is what's applied to creator. So maybe we have a few students named Sally. How are we going to tell them apart? Well, creator actually takes care of that for us by automatically assigning all of those Sallys a different unique ID number for their record. So when you're looking at all of your data, you're going to see this pretty familiar looking information like a first name or an email. Creator is actually seeing in the back end is these ID numbers next to every single record. And creator creates those automatically. So you can actually view the record IDs in your application. Occasionally, this will be useful in scripting. So I'm not going to run through all of this, but in case you are curious about this, you can refer back to these slides later on. So I've added in all the directions, and basically what you do is you can choose any report in your application. And if you click on the wrench and open up its settings, then you can drag on an ID field, and you can actually see the hidden ID numbers of all of your records. So now that you know that every record has an ID number automatically, how could we write some criteria that will fetch every single record from a particular form? There's a few different ways you could do it. Your way, I did not put on the slide, but that would be perfectly fine as well. So ID numbers are always a number, and they're always created. So there's a few different ways you could write criteria that's going to fetch every single record. So we could say ID isn't equal to null, ID isn't equal to 0, ID is greater than 0. All of these things are going to work. Okay, so now we're going to switch into exercise mode, where we're going to start adding stuff to Karen's cooking app. And then I'm going to give you some time to catch up, and we'll see how much of this we get through. The first thing we're going to try and do is autofill the price when a lesson gets selected. So if we go into Karen's cooking class and we take a look at the registrations form, we're actually storing information about how much each lesson costs, right? Because you guys all went in and added those prices. So now when somebody chooses a lesson, like Yummy Tacos, we want to see the price get automatically filled out here. So what I'm going to do is go to the registration form, and I'm going to click Workflow. And so I want to put this script for the lesson field on user input, because we're only going to run the script once somebody has chosen a lesson. So I'm going to scroll down here until I find the lessons field, and I'm going to click on user input, and that's where we're going to start writing our script. So to fetch the price, I'll call this lesson price, we're going to fetch it from the lessons form, and what we're going to do is we're going to write the ID, which should be one of these options here, is equal to input.lessons. And so I'll add on a dot, and then I'll type in price. So now we have the lesson price saved in this variable, and what I'm going to do is change the name of my collection variable so it's inputting into a field instead of saving inside a collection variable. Now when I refresh this, and I choose a lesson like Yummy Tacos, we see the price autofill. So we're grabbing just the price field from the lessons form, and we're inputting it into the price field on our registrations form. So this is, we're using our lookup field as a related value. And it wouldn't live update, but let's say I went into my lessons report, changed the price of that lesson to 50, and then went back in here and chose Yummy Tacos again. Now we would see 50. The next time somebody loads this, they would see 50 there. Okay, so what's important to know here is that because we're using a lookup field to choose the lesson on that form, we're actually referring to a record ID. So earlier I was explaining how every single record has an ID that's automatically created for it, right? And we see is the nice, pretty information about a record, right? Like Sally as a name. And what Creator sees is that ID number. So when I choose Yummy Tacos, Creator is actually referring to the record ID of the Yummy Tacos record. And so what we're seeing on the front end with this lookup field is different from what's happening in the back end. And so that's why when I wrote this syntax here, we're using the ID number of our lessons form. So if you wanted to auto-populate two fields, is I would copy this line and paste it down below. And let's say I want to fill in some other field. Let's say the promo code. Maybe we had a promo code attached to that lesson. And then I would change this to promo code. I could do something like that. Or alternately, instead of fetching into a field where we've written input.price, we could fetch into some variable. So we could maybe say lesson info equals, and then write the rest of our fetch right there, right? And then if we wanted to pull out different fields from that, we could just say lesson info or lesson info dot field 1, lesson info dot field 2, and we could assign all of these fields that we're looking up to different fields in our form. Let's take a look at updating records. So this is the syntax for updating a record. There's two different ways that you could do this. So one of them is basically where you write a fetch and then you set it equal to a new value. But usually what I do is I will write my fetch record script on one line. So I'll have a collection variable which is storing all my information. And then on the second line, I'll use that collection variable and then I'll choose which field I want to update. So I'll put in dot field and then I'll give it a new value. So for example, I look up all of the people who are from Pleasanton on my first line, and then I'll say maybe Pleasanton students dot city equals, maybe the city name of Pleasanton is being renamed. I don't know why I chose this example. I would give it a new value though, right? Okay, so the next thing we want to do is we want to update the capacity of each lesson every time somebody signs up. So if you remember from the other day, we should have a capacity field for each lesson. So if I look in my lessons report, you should see a capacity, and you should definitely see some kind of number entered in there, right? So now what we're going to do is add in a script so that every time somebody registers, whatever lesson they chose, we're going to reduce the capacity by 1 because one more student has gone into that class. And then eventually, once we've filled up the class, the capacity will hit 0, at which point we added in a filter to our lessons, if you'll remember. So the filter said that if the capacity is greater than 0, we'll show it, and if it reaches 0, we're not going to show it. So basically, we can create this system where once a lesson gets filled up, we just automatically hide that from future registrations, right? So we can build in this kind of automation using these sorts of deluge scripts. Okay, so if you're on the registrations form, you're going to want to go back into the workflow builder again. And then we need to decide when we're going to execute this script. So we only want to do this when a new record is added and it's successfully saved in our database. We don't want to do it before then because maybe somebody won't actually complete their full registration, and so want to make sure this is on add on success. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look up information about the lesson that the student has chosen. So I'm going to name my variable lesson details so I can remember what's in here. Actually, never mind. I'm going to drag on fetch records first and then name my variable lesson details. And we're going to be looking up the lessons form. And then we need to choose our field. So the lessons field is a lookup. So what am I going to choose here? And then is equal to, we just want to set the ID equal to whatever somebody chooses in the lessons field, right? Because they have that drop down, there's a bunch of different lessons they can choose from. So we're going to be using the field here, right? So I'll put input dot and then lessons is the name of the field. Okay, so I hit Command S. This should save. Cool. So we've looked up the lesson details, but now we actually need to add in the script, which is going to update the capacity now that we've looked up the particular record we want to alter. So remember the update record syntax is we have collection variable dot field equals our new value. So I'm going to do lesson details. And then which field do we want to update? Capacity. And then we need to give it a new value. So how could we figure out what the current capacity is, right? Because we need to put in some kind of expression here, which is one less than what we had before. We already have the capacity because we fetched it in this last line, right? So we'll do lesson details dot capacity, and then we want to reduce this by 1, so I'll just do -1, and then we make sure to have our semicolon saved in there. So now if I go and test this out, I could add a new student in here Dylan is signing up definitely for Yummy Tacos. And I will hit submit. So if you'll remember before, all of my lessons, we had a capacity of 15, but if we look at Yummy Tacos, wow, it's magically 14 now. So we know that one more student has entered that class. So this next example is, this is the tough one. So far we've been going easy. This one's going to get a little bit more complicated. So the first thing we need to do to make this example work is we need to add in a promo code form to our application. So I'm going to edit my application, and I'll hit Create New Form. I'll name this Promo Codes. And so the idea here is that maybe Karen wants to track how successful each one of her marketing campaigns is, right? So she can do flyers or radio ads or TV ads in different areas, and each one of those ads could have a different promo code on it. And then she just waits for people to sign up for her classes, and she sees, okay, well, this promo code which I put on the flyers in Pleasanton is actually getting me a lot of signups. So that must be an effective way of advertising, right? So what we could do is we can save promo codes in our application, and then we can use those to give people discounts when they're registering. So the first thing we need to do is create this form where we're going to save all of the promo codes in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add on a number for the promo code field. You could also do a single line in another case, but because we're working with a number field in another place, it'll be simpler if you just stick with a number field. So I'll just call this promo code. And then I'll drag on a percent field. Oops, I'll probably change the order of these. And this will be discount percent. So that's the percentage off of their lesson price that they're going to get if they use this code. And then finally, we could also add in some kind of system, much like the lesson capacity, where each code has a certain number of uses before it expires. So we'll add in this field and we'll call it number of uses left, or number of uses. I'm actually going to give it a simpler field deluge name here. You'll probably want to do this since my example script, I actually use number of uses as our field name. Okay, so once you've created this field, then we can move into the scripting. So what we're going to do is we're going to validate this promo code. So once somebody types in a code into their registration, we want to check, is that one of the codes we have saved in this app, right? We want to see if they've actually entered in a valid promo code. And then if they have entered a valid one, then only then will we apply our discount. So the first thing I'm going to do here is once I've built this form, I'm just going to access it. I'm going to add in an example promo code just so we can test it out later. So I'll call this one promo code 123. Gives you 10% off, and we're only giving it out to 5 people. So this is just like a little flow chart I've included, which sort of explains what we're doing here, but that's just for review purposes mostly. I will go through and explain it all as we're building. So the first thing we want to do is figure out where to put our script, of course. Switch over to the registrations form. And we're going to click on workflow so we can access the Deluge builder there. And then we want to make sure our field actions are showing, because we're only going to check if the promo code is accurate once somebody has entered a promo code in this field. So we'll choose on user input for the promo code field. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to write a conditional, and that's where all of our script will go inside these 2 brackets. So we want to make sure we're only going to try this out once somebody has entered in a lesson and they've entered in a promo code. Otherwise, there's no point in executing the script, right? So I will drag on our if condition, and I will say if lessons doesn't equal null. And I'll do the double ampersand there. And promo code, I can just use these little pop-ups to write my code, is not equal to null. And then I'll add in some spaces here so we have some room to write our code. So the next thing we want to do is we want to look up the information about this promo code record, right? So this is going to be another fetch record script. So I'm going to write promo info, and we're going to fetch any information from the promo code form. And then we're going to add in our criteria. So probably what I should have done was dragged on the fetch records block, so some of this stuff would be pre-filling for me, but you were probably smarter than me, and you already did that. So we want to make sure that the code that is input into our promo code field, so this input.promo code, matches a code that has been saved in the promo codes form. So I'll write code, which is our field name, is equal to input.promo code, and that automatically fills there. And of course, I will add in the semicolon. So now we need to add in a little formula which will actually apply a discount percentage. Our script will look something like this. So the discounted price that we're giving them is going to be the original price minus the original price times our discount percentage divided by 100. So should I have maybe given you guys a simpler example? I don't know, probably, but we're gonna make this work, so no worries. So this is actually the script that you need to add in here, and the other part that we're gonna add is this conditional. So before we can apply our discount, we need to actually make sure that there are uses left on our promo code. So we're gonna do one more conditional, which is actually inside this other conditional, right? So I'm gonna drag on this if block, and I'm going to say if promo info dot, and now if I scroll down here, I can see all this information about our promo code. So we should have this number of uses field. I'll choose that, and then I'll choose greater than 0. So if we have at least some uses left, then we're going to apply this discount. So when we created the promo code form, we added that as one of our fields. So over here, I actually have 2 versions of the promo codes form in my application. Okay, and then finally, I'm going to apply this kind of insane formula here to turn that discount percentage into a discounted price, right? So if all of this stuff is true so far, we want to update whatever has been written in the price field. So I'll do input.price. And then remember, the first part is we need to use the original price in our formula. So I'll do input.price minus. And then we can multiply the price by the percentage to figure out how much we're going to take off. So I'll actually put this part inside parentheses so it's a little bit easier to see. So input.price times, and then we need to find the value which is actually stored in our promo code record of the discount percentage, right? So we're actually just going to write promo info dot discount percent. And hopefully yours is auto-filling, so you actually don't have to keep checking if the variable names are the same. And then I'll do slash to divide by 100. And then finally, we add in the semicolon. So I hit save, make sure everything's working so far. Okay, no error messages. So the last thing we want to do is what happens if somebody enters a promo code that is just wrong, right? So maybe it's a promo code we haven't saved in our app, or it's been mistyped. We need to tell them that the promo code is not valid. And so we can use this alert keyword here to actually display our own custom alert message in Creator. So we don't have to give them some insane message where it's just like an error showing up for them. We can actually control what happens. So to do that, I'm going to add in an else block. Okay, there we go. So you drag in else block down below your if block. So this just means we've already checked that somebody's entered something in the lessons field and the promo code field. So if all that's happened, then we're going to look up their promo code. And if that promo code has uses left, then we're going to give them a discount. But if there's any problem that happens with anything else, we're going to run the script in the else block. So what we'll do is we'll just write alert, and then we're going to put our alert in quotes because we actually are writing our alert as if it's like a string, right? So we're just going to tell them, you've entered an invalid promo code. And then we can even help them out. So maybe they just mistyped it. What we could do is we could do input.promocode equals, and then I'll just put in some quotation marks with nothing in there. So if they mess up, we'll tell them they've messed up, and then we'll just clear the field out for them so they can try another attempt. That is true. If we had a lot of time, maybe we could have added in different alert messages for all of the different situations that could happen. But yes, so if there are no promo codes left, we could also have an else if block in here which says this promo code has expired, all the uses are up, right? So now that we've written this big long script, we want to test it out. We want to see if this baby is working. So I am going to hit access this application, and we'll go into the registrations. I'm going to pick my lesson, and I want to have my promo code, but where did my promo code field go? And it's actually because he walked you through this step the other day where it only shows up for people who are from Pleasanton. And then, if you remember the promo code that you saved earlier, enter that into the box. I think mine was 123, and we can see that this value has actually updated here. Now we have a lower price.